Welcome to the 62nd episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with Trevor Shane, author of the novel Children of Paranoia. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. Today my guest is Trevor Shane, author of the new book Children of Paranoia. Trevor, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Sure. Well, if the readers listening haven't heard about your novel, Children of Paranoia, yet, can you describe the new novel?
Sure. I think that the easiest way to describe it is kind of a conceptual novel, so I always like to start at the beginning of the novel. And the novel opens with the chapter where the protagonist is on the streets in Brooklyn at night, and he follows a woman home from closing up her shop for work and strangles her on the doorstep of her home. And as the book goes on, you start to learn about why he did that. And you learn that he's actually a soldier in this centuries-old underground war that's been going on kind of in the shadows of everyday society. And the woman that he killed was somebody on the other side. And you start to learn about some more of the rules and history of the war and the motivations of the different players.
Great. Well, I know in some of the early press and reviews, it's Children of Paranoia has been described as a dystopic novel. And I'm curious, just as someone who's a writer and I assume kind of an observer of popular culture, I'm sure you're aware that there's been, somewhat of a resurgence of dystopic fiction with novels like The Road and The Hunger Games. And then
right.
equally you have, for the lack of a better word, kind of dark novels both for adults and young adults with zombies, werewolves, and vampires.
Yeah.
Since we
many of those.
Sure. Since we recently marked the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, which was certainly a dark day in American history, I'm curious, have you ever considered, do you think that there's that some of this dark fiction and not only by the people writing it, by the people reading it, is some way of kind of our collective attempt to kind of comprehend the darkness of that day and kind of the resulting wars and what's been going on in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think there might be some of that. I also think, September 11th, I think, was in a lot of ways an initial step in just into really uncertain times. Since then, the past decade has really been both an adventure and a misadventure, with the wars, the economy, the financial collapse or near financial collapse, and followed by natural disasters and extreme weather, and just it has really been an extremely turbulent decade. And I think a lot of times historically, when you get into times like that, people look to fiction to try and both understand it in some ways, and also I think in some ways to tell themselves that as crazy as things are, they're not that bad. One of the joys I think of reading zombie fiction or watching zombie movies is that's pretty much as bad as it could possibly get, and no matter what's happening with you, it's way better than that. So I think I think it's a twofold. I think the exploration of just I think fiction really gives you an insight into how other people think, whether it's the author or if the author's good, the characters in the book. And when things are uncertain around you, it's nice to know that there are other people considering these topics and thinking about and reacting to these things. So I do think there is probably a connection.
Sure. Well, with your novel, Children of Paranoia, do you remember if there was a specific moment when you had the idea for kind of the plot and the underpinning of the novel as you described it, or was it something that developed over time as you were working on writing fiction?
Yeah, the original idea actually kind of hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was actually just walking down the street in Brooklyn when I thought of that first chapter, and I was actually looking around me, and it was almost like the set for the chapter, and I thought it would be really interesting to create a novel around a protagonist who kills someone in the first chapter. But as you go in the novel, I mean, what we learn about the war is that both sides of the war think that they are the good guys, and at least in the first book, you learn that the soldiers in the war don't know how the war started. They know why they fight because there's some revenge factor because their families were in the war, and there's some kind of non-nationalistic jingoism on both sides, kind of a root for the home team thing. And I thought it would be neat to have this character who kills someone in the first chapter, who is your protagonist, and have the person he kills not be a bad guy, at least not a stereotypical bad guy, and kind of to struggle with that tension without going into the very easy dichotomy of good versus evil. I'm a big fan of the examples I always use are like the Star Wars movies or the Harry Potter books. I think they're great books. I think they're great movies, but I think very rarely in real life you have somebody stand up and say, come to the dark side.
Yeah.
Voldemort is, there's very few people historically that have just said, I'm the bad guy, and you should come to me because I'm going to win. Usually, everyone involved in conflict thinks they're on the right side. So it started with that first chapter, and then kind of evolved from there.
Right. And so when you were walking down the street in Brooklyn, did you actually see someone, or did you think like what would happen if they got killed, or was it just?
No, fortunately it wasn't. I didn't identify any exact victim.
Right.
That was all out of my imagination.
Sure.
I just thought it would be, the street I was on in Brooklyn. I actually lived near there. Brooklyn only shows up. This is the only chapter in the book that Brooklyn shows up, but it's a very idyllic, family-oriented area with tree-lined streets.
Sure.
And to kind of break that was the idea. Where this is the perfect setting to have that smashed in the first 15 pages.
Great. Well, I'm curious about your writing background. Have you always been interested in writing?
When I was growing up, I always wanted to be a writer, and then I always did a little writing on the side. Then after I got to college, graduated college, and I always thought in the back of my mind, one day I'm going to be a writer as soon as I have something worthwhile to write about. And went on, had a completely different career, and really started on Children of Paranoia shortly after I turned 30, when I thought to myself, if you are going to try and do this, you're running out of time, and now's the right time. If you don't have something to tell the world now, you're never going to.
Right. So what was the path to publication like for you with Children of Paranoia? Did you work with an agent, and what was that process like, finding an agent?
Yeah, I did the very, the totally stereotypical query agents, and find an agent, and then have the agent go out and work with the various publishers. Thank God for the internet, because you come into this business, you have no idea actually how any of that works.
Right.
So I would say, 6 years ago, I had no idea how any of that works. But it took me, once the initial draft of Children of Paranoia was finished, it took me about a year to get an agent, and then probably a year for her to sell it. And the interesting part for me was there are a number of people who were interested that asked for certain changes that I was simply unwilling to compromise on. Mm-hmm. So I think that lengthened the process a little bit. but then then I finally found a great agent who really believed in the work, and even though she had a number of revisions and suggestions, she believed in really what I was trying to do and understood what I was trying to do. So I was happy to listen to her advice from there, and the same thing happened when I eventually landed at Dutton, which is the publisher that published Children of Paranoia. The editor that I work with there is fantastic, and he right from the first meeting with him, he understood exactly what I was trying to do and really believed it and really enjoyed it. So
that's great. So I'm curious if you're willing to talk about it. What were some of the things that you were unwilling to compromise on?
Yeah,
or that they wanted you to change?
The Children of Paranoia is the first book in a trilogy, and a lot of the direction that we had discussed was things that happened later in that will happen in books 2 and books 3. So I'm a little hesitant to talk about things that haven't happened yet.
Oh yeah, sure.
But when you have me on again in 2 years, we can go into a lot more detail about that.
Sounds good. We'll have to make a date.
Yeah.
So what is your actual writing process like? Do you use any specific writing tools or just open up Microsoft Word or what's that like?
Yeah, I generally write late at night. I spend the day thinking about what I'm going to write about that night, and I generally write for 4 or 5 hours, relatively late in the evening. Just regular computer, sit down, bang it out. Depending on what part of the book I'm writing, sometimes I'll listen to music when I'm writing. There's certain people for certain scenes, action sequences. There's certain types of music I might listen to that just really, I think, help the pacing of the writing. And then at other times, if I'm writing sections from a particular character's point of view, I might try and listen to music that I think that character would actually listen to really help get into their mindset. But beyond that, it's really bang it out in Word on a laptop, and then go through it 5 or 6 times in revisions.
So what's a typical playlist for an action scene?
A lot of the action, a lot of that will be instrumental. There's a great, and a lot of it's, it helps to listen to the same thing over and over again, so you're not too surprised. There's this great avant-garde cellist, actually, named Zoe Keating, that I love as far as atmospheric music, and it's really, she does this layered atmospheric music, and it's really, any of it would be a great soundtrack to really kind of a dark action film, and often I will listen to her for action sequences. But then, I'll go into other areas, but usually it's instrumental, but, always kind of dark and well-tempoed.
Great. Well, who are some of the authors that you enjoy reading and that inspire you?
Every time people ask, I have kind of my list of people that always ask who are your favorite authors, and I have kind of the stereotypical guy's favorite author list of Joseph Heller, Ernest Hemingway, and Kurt Vonnegut. And I think Heller, specifically Catch-22, I think was a big influence on Children of Paranoia. Kind of the paranoid fiction, I think, is you see in that. I also have to mention, when I was the first adult books that I ever read when I was younger was Stephen King, and I went through a phase of about 4 or 5 years where he was the only person I ever read. And his not pure horror, but his more conceptual fiction, I still consider a really big influence. So he has works like The Running Man in book form, not movie form. The book
Mm-hmm.
was great. The movie was silly.
Yeah.
And The Long Walk, and stories like that are they're almost science fiction, but they're not. They're just conceptual, and they take high concepts to create really interesting character studies, and it's something that I've kind of tried to emulate with Children of Paranoia.
Great. Well, given your success in getting Children of Paranoia, written and published, what advice would you have for someone who is an aspiring writer and would like to have their own novels published?
The single most important thing in my mind is to have thick skin. No matter how good you are, you face a ton of rejection, and to me, obviously you need talent to get published. You need a good story, probably even more than talent. Having a good story is an important thing. But I think the main thing that probably keeps people from getting there is just the fact that they are not able to take the rejection and the criticism. I always keep in the back of my mind certain books that I love that never really sold well, and think to myself, if a book like that could have that much meaning to me, then all I have to do is get my book in front of a few people to read it, and if I'm able to do that, then I'm successful, and everything above that is a bonus, and that's kind of the approach I've taken from day one. So if you can get in a mindset like that, you can develop thick skin, listen to the criticism that's good criticism, and ignore the criticism that's bad criticism, and I think you'll be on your way.
And you think that's what helped you develop a thick skin?
Yeah, I think I thought about those. There's a specific book called The Queen's Gambit by the guy who wrote the Hustler. And it's one of my all-time favorite books, and you can't even find it in bookstores. And I would think of that, and then I would think of books like The Great Gatsby, which I personally can't stand, and is largely considered one of the best books ever written. So every time you get criticized, you can think of on those two ends. People have different opinions, and if you're actually good, you're going to find your fan base. Sure.
Well, you mentioned a trilogy. Do you have a title for the second novel yet?
We have a working title. Right now, it's being bandied about between my editor and I as Children of the Underground. And that's
Great.
I think that'll be a scoop for you. I don't think that's actually been published anywhere yet, but I'm pretty sure that's where we're going.
Okay. And is that slated tentatively for publication? When would that be?
Yeah, I think we're going to try and publish the second and third in roughly 1 year increments.
Gotcha.
So this Children of Paranoia came out last Thursday on September 8th. So I would think that sometime next fall the second book will come out, and then hopefully the third book the fall after that. So keeps me busy.
Great. Well, where can people find you online?
The website for the current book is just childrenofparanoia.com, or you can go to trevor-shane.com. They take you to the same site.
Gotcha.
And it's got the awesome book trailer that Dutton did for Children of Paranoia, and a blog section that I try to keep up to date with reviews and news about the book.
Great, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, again, we've been speaking with Trevor Shane, author of the new novel Children of Paranoia. It just went on sale September 8th, and it's available in bookstores and is an ebook now. Trevor, thanks for taking the time to do the interview.
I really appreciate it, Jeff. I had a really good time.
Hi, this is author Peter O'Rulian, author of The Unremembered, and you're listening to the Reading and Writing Podcast.
Thanks for listening to my latest podcast. If you have a chance, please leave a review of the podcast in iTunes. It only takes a moment. Until next time, read some good books and be well.
We did it again. Verizon was just named America's most reliable network by Root Metrics for the 16th time in a row, proving once again that nobody builds networks like Verizon builds networks. That's why we're building 5G right. That's why there's only one best network, Verizon. Best and most reliable based on Root Metrics reports from second half 2013 to first half 2021 of 3 operators on all network types combined, not specific to 5G networks.
In South Dakota, we're looking forward to exploring new roads and wide open spaces. When you're ready to travel, go great places. Learn more at travelsouthdakota.com.